You eat chicken eggs without a second thought. Every morning in kitchens across the world, people crack open eggs from one specific bird and call it breakfast the chicken. Egg has become so embedded in global food culture that it barely registers as a choice anymore. It is just what eggs are. The word egg in most contexts means chicken egg, the same way the word fruit in most grocery stores means a very specific selection of options, out of hundreds of thousands that exist. But here is the question that almost nobody asks. Why chicken eggs? Out of every egg-laying creature on the planet, and there are thousands of them, from birds to reptiles to fish to insects, why did one species of bird end up the universal supplier of the most consumed animal product on Earth? And the follow-up question, which is where it gets genuinely interesting. Are we actually missing something by not eating the others? Because it turns out we do eat other animal eggs, just not the ones most people think of. And the reasons why some eggs became global staples, while others stayed exotic, prohibited, or simply forgotten are a mixture of biology, economics, cultural history, and some genuinely surprising nutritional science. That changes the picture significantly. Let's go through this properly. Start with the biological reality. Because the first thing to understand is that eggs, as a food category, are not all the same. The word covers an enormous range of objects with radically different biological compositions, practical characteristics, and culinary properties. A chicken egg and a fish egg, and a crocodile egg are all technically eggs. They share almost nothing else. The egg of a bird is a self-contained, developmental environment. It contains everything a developing chick needs to grow, from a single cell to a functional animal protein fat, vitamins, minerals, water, and a physical shell that provides structure and protection. The relative proportions of these components vary significantly between bird species, but the general profile is consistent, enough that different bird eggs are, at least broadly substitutable as food. This is why people who eat duck eggs, quail eggs, or goose eggs report that they are recognizably egg-like, familiar in texture and flavor, varying mostly in size and in the richness of the yolk. Fish eggs are an entirely different category. Caviar. The eggs of sturgeon and other roe are small, soft, and bursting with fat and flavor. In ways that are nothing like cracking open a hard, shelled bird egg, they function as a condiment or a luxury garnish, rather than as a primary protein source that can be scrambled and eaten with toast. The biological purpose of fish eggs is the same, providing nutrients for developing young. But the composition, the ratio of fat to protein, the physical form, and the culinary role are so different that they barely deserve the same name. Reptile eggs from crocodiles, turtles. Snakes are biologically more similar to bird eggs than fish eggs are, but with a notably different shell texture. Reptile eggshells are leathery rather than rigid, which changes how they cook and how they're handled. Crocodile eggs have been eaten by humans in multiple cultures and are eaten today in parts of Asia and Africa. They are described as creamier than chicken eggs, with a stronger flavor, and they scramble and fry in ways that are broadly familiar. The nutritional profile is similar enough that there is no fundamental reason why crocodile eggs couldn't be a staple food, somewhere with access to large crocodile populations. So why aren't they? The answer starts with chickens. Because to understand why chicken eggs dominate, you have to understand what is actually extraordinary about chickens. As food animals, chickens are, by almost any metric, the most efficiently domesticated food animal in the history of human agriculture. A chicken in a modern laying operation produces somewhere between 250 and 300 eggs per year. This is approximately 10 times the number that ancestral red jungle fowl, the wild ancestor of domestic chickens, would have produced in a year. This extraordinary laying rate is the product of thousands of years of selective breeding intensified dramatically by 20th century agricultural genetics, producing an animal that has essentially been engineered into a continuous egg-laying machine. No other bird produces eggs at anywhere near this rate. Under comparable conditions, a duck produces 150 to 200 eggs per year, significant but below the chicken. A goose produces 20 to 40 eggs per year. A turkey produces 80 to 100. Quail produce in high numbers, but the eggs are small enough that production per unit of feed is less efficient. At scale, ostriches produce 40 to 60 eggs per year, which are enormous. A single ostrich egg is equivalent to roughly 24 chicken eggs. in volume, but the time and resource investment per egg is high, beyond laying rate. Chickens have several other characteristics that made them the dominant egg-laying animal. They are small, which means they require less space per individual and less feed per egg produced than larger birds. They are omnivores that can be fed on almost anything, making them adaptable to diverse agricultural contexts around the world. They reach sexual maturity quickly, around 18 to 20 weeks, which means rapid turnover in breeding programs and fast adaptation to selection pressure. And they domesticate well, with docile enough temperaments and flexible enough social structures to function in high-density operations. The chicken's dominance in egg production is not cultural accident or aesthetic preference. It is the product of biological characteristics that, when combined with systematic selective breeding, produced an animal optimally suited to producing eggs at the scale that modern food systems require. If duck breeding had started earlier, and with greater intensity, ducks might occupy this role. They didn't, and chickens do. And the incumbency advantage of a global supply chain built around a single species is now so profound that it would take extraordinary circumstances to displace it. Now let's talk about why we do eat some other eggs, and what that tells us. Duck eggs are the most widely consumed alternative to chicken eggs globally, particularly in East and Southeast Asia, where they are used in baking, cooking, and preserved, forms that have no equivalent in Western food culture. The most famous is the century egg, a duck, chicken, or quail egg preserved in a mixture of clay ash, salt, quicklime, and rice hulls for weeks to months. The result is a translucent, gelatinous egg with a flavor that is intensely savory and complex, which is either extraordinary or appalling, depending on your baseline expectations. It is one of the most striking examples of what fermentation and preservation chemistry can do to a food product, and it has been a staple of Chinese cuisine for centuries. Duck eggs have a larger yolk, relative to white, than chicken eggs, a higher fat content, and a richer flavor. That makes them particularly valuable in baking. Cakes made with duck eggs rise higher and have a more pronounced flavor than those made with chicken eggs. In cultures where they are used regularly, they are considered superior to chicken eggs for specific applications, not as a curiosity, but as a deliberate culinary choice. Quail eggs are consumed across Asia, Europe, and Latin America, typically as a delicacy or garnish, rather than as a primary food source. They are small, approximately 5 quail eggs to 1 chicken egg, with a flavor that is mild and slightly richer than chicken eggs. Their small size makes them labor-intensive to use at scale, but visually appealing as a garnish, which is why they appear in Japanese bento boxes, Korean street food, and European upscale cooking. Goose eggs are available in Europe during the short spring laying season and have historically been consumed across rural communities where geese were kept as dual-purpose animals, providing both eggs and meat. A goose egg is roughly 3 times the size of a chicken egg, with a rich, fatty flavor and a texture that cooks differently due to its higher protein content. They are not widely commercially available, but where they are found, they are valued. Ostrich eggs are consumed in parts of Africa and have been eaten by humans for a very long time. There is archaeological evidence of ostrich egg consumption and of ostrich eggshells being used as containers, dating back over 60,000 years. A single ostrich egg provides a meal-sized amount of food, which makes it practical in specific contexts, though the logistics of cracking and cooking one are considerably more demanding than handling a chicken egg. Ostrich egg farms exist and produce eggs commercially in small quantities. Fish eggs specifically, caviar and various roe, represent the most valuable eggs on the global food market, and the contrast between their cultural status and chicken eggs is striking. Beluga caviar from wild Caspian sea sturgeon reaches prices of thousands of dollars per kilogram, making it one of the most expensive foods in the world. Salmon roe, flying fish roe, tobacco sea urchin roe. These products are consumed as delicacies, condiments, and luxury items across multiple food cultures, primarily Japanese, Russian, and various European traditions. The reason fish eggs occupy the luxury category, rather than the staple category, is a combination of factors that parallel the chicken egg story from the opposite direction. Fish that produce valuable roe are difficult, or impossible, to farm at the scale required for mass market supply. Sturgeon take years to reach reproductive maturity and produce roe only once every few years. The eggs are small and highly perishable, requiring sophisticated cold chain logistics. That chicken eggs don't need, and the flavor profile is intensely briny and complex, in ways that make them unsuitable as a general-purpose ingredient. You can't make an omelet from caviar, at least, not in any way that uses its particular qualities well. Now let's talk about the nutritional comparison, because this is where the picture gets most interesting, and where the dominance of chicken eggs looks most like an accident of history, rather than a verdict of biology. Duck eggs contain significantly more vitamin B12, vitamin D, and omega-3 fatty acids than chicken eggs of the same size. Their higher fat content means more fat, soluble vitamins across the board, more vitamin, more vitamin E, more choline, which is a nutrient critical for brain development, and liver function that most people don't get enough of. For people who already eat duck eggs regularly, this nutritional superiority over chicken eggs is not news. For people whose entire egg experience is chicken-based, it is a genuine revelation. Goose eggs show similar patterns: higher fat content, higher vitamin density, more protein per egg than chicken eggs, adjusted for size differences. Quail eggs, despite their small size, have a reputation in several traditional medical systems as having therapeutic value. And while the claims of traditional medicine are often overstated, quail eggs do have measurably different ratios of specific amino acids and higher concentrations of certain micronutrients relative to their size than chicken eggs. The nutritional differences between egg types are real and meaningful. The chicken egg is nutritionally excellent. It is not being displaced from the category of nutritionally valuable foods by any of this. But the assumption that the chicken egg is simply the egg, the default and optimal form of egg nutrition, is not supported by comparative nutritional analysis. Different eggs have different nutritional profiles, and for specific nutritional goals, other eggs may be objectively superior. Now let's talk about the eggs we don't eat and why. Because this is where the question becomes most interesting and most culturally revealing. Turtle eggs are eaten in parts of Central America, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific, where they have been traditional food sources for coastal communities for centuries. The sea turtle egg is soft-shelled, rich and high in protein and fat. In many of these regions, sea turtle egg consumption is now illegal or heavily restricted because of the endangered status of most sea turtle species. The cultural history of turtle egg consumption collides directly with conservation biology in a way that produces real tension in communities where the eggs have been a traditional food. For generations, alligator and crocodile eggs are eaten in parts of Southeast Asia and Africa, where crocodilian populations are managed commercially. In Australia, some indigenous communities have traditional practices around collecting crocodile eggs. The eggs are large American. Alligator eggs are roughly twice the size of chicken eggs and described as having a flavor similar to chicken eggs but richer and slightly gamier. There is no fundamental, biological reason why crocodile eggs couldn't be produced commercially at scale in regions with managed crocodile populations. And some small-scale commercial production exists. Snake eggs are consumed in parts of Asia, particularly in China and Vietnam, where they appear in traditional medicine contexts. As well as in food, they are small, soft-shelled, and have a flavor that is described as mild. The culinary tradition around them is not widely documented in Western food literature, but they appear in markets and in restaurant contexts across the region. Insect eggs, while not widely discussed as a food category, in most Western contexts, are consumed in various forms across multiple cultures. Ant eggs, or more precisely ant pupae, which resemble eggs visually, are eaten in parts of Mexico, where Eskimos have been a delicacy since before European contact, described as having a nutty, buttery flavor with a texture like soft cheese. Water boatmen. Bug eggs are harvested from lake surfaces in Mexico and used to make a food called ahuatehuatl, which was reportedly a staple of the Aztec diet. These represent food traditions of significant age that have remained culturally localized, rather than entering the global food system. The pattern in all of these cases is consistent. Eggs that are eaten widely share characteristics. They come from animals that can be kept or managed at scale. They are produced in sufficient numbers to supply regular consumption. They have a flavor profile and physical form that makes them useful as ingredients, rather than only as luxury items. And they exist within food cultures that normalize their use early enough that the infrastructure for their production and distribution developed, by the way. If you want to go even deeper into the secret lives of ancient humans, I just launched a full course called The Secret Lives of Ancient Humans. 10 modules, 3+ hours of content, covering everything we never talk about on YouTube, what they feared, how they communicated, what hunted them, and much more. Plus an exclusive PDF guide included. Link in the description, see you inside. Eggs that are not widely eaten lack one or more of these characteristics. The animal is hard to domesticate at scale. The eggs are too small or too few. The flavor is too distinctive for general use, or the food culture that would have normalized them never developed. The institutional momentum to make them mainstream. And then there is the category of eggs that are not eaten, primarily for regulatory or conservation reasons. Turtle eggs being the most significant example, where the question of whether we should eat them is no longer primarily cultural or culinary, but ecological and ethical. These eggs were eaten historically, were eaten at scale in many cases, and stopped being eaten. Not because people stopped wanting them, but because the populations of the animals that produced them couldn't sustain the harvesting pressure that human appetite placed on them. This is the egg story that the chicken egg story obscures. The chicken egg became dominant, partly because chickens could be scaled in ways that were sustainable. You could breed more chickens, produce more eggs without depleting a wild population. Many of the eggs humans historically gathered from wild populations could not be scaled this way. The hunting pressure outstripped the reproductive rate of the source species, and the food source declined or disappeared. Turtle eggs are the most visible, current example of this dynamic. But the history of human egg consumption includes many cases of local depletion of bird colony, eggs, seabird egg overcollection, and the elimination of traditional egg sources through habitat destruction and overharvesting. The global food system's concentration around chicken eggs is, among other things, a response to the unsustainability of depending on wild egg sources at population scale. The chickens solved the sustainability problem that wild egg collection couldn't solve, at the cost of concentration and all the vulnerabilities that concentration brings. Let's close with what this picture reveals about food systems and the narrowing of the human diet. The chicken egg's dominance is, in one sense, a triumph of optimization. The most efficient egg-producing system ever developed, producing the highest quantity of protein and fat per unit of feed and space of any comparable food animal. It feeds billions of people reliably and cheaply, in a way that no other single food source can match. But the extreme concentration of global egg production around a single species creates vulnerabilities that the diversity of traditional egg consumption didn't have a disease that targets chickens, and several have, including avian influenza strains that have driven massive culls of laying flocks, can disrupt egg supply across entire regions, simultaneously. A single species monoculture in food production is a single point of failure in the food system. The eggs we don't eat represent both alternatives and cautionary tales. The turtle egg represents what happens when a food source is consumed beyond the capacity of its source population to sustain it. The caviar market represents what happens when a luxury food becomes so valued that it drives its own source species toward extinction. The crocodile egg, the goose egg, the quail egg represent genuine, nutritional alternatives that remain at the margins of global food culture for reasons that are historical and economic, rather than biological. The chicken egg is extraordinary. It deserves its position at the center of global food culture. But the answer to why we don't eat other animal eggs is not that other eggs aren't worth eating, is that the economic and historical forces that built the global food system around chicken eggs created an incumbency so profound that alternatives never had the space to develop their own. Industrial momentum, the eggs exist, the animals that produce them exist. The nutritional value is there. In many cases, the nutritional value is superior. The infrastructure, the cultural normalization, and the 300 eggs per hen per year that made chicken eggs the default. Those are the things that don't exist for anything else. That's why you're eating chicken eggs for breakfast. That's why the word egg means one specific thing. in almost every language and culture. That has been touched by industrial food production. Not because it was the only option, because it was the option that scaled. And now you know exactly how deliberate and how contingent that choice actually is.